morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Patrick Flynn, and welcome to this beautiful Saturday morning and joining me for a different perspective. I actually almost said quick tip that time, Brandon, but I've done these for so many times. But today, obviously, and just a short time ago, we changed it to a different perspective because I wanted to give you a very different perspective on the way that the Wellness Way approach looks at the body and looks at all the things that in healthcare today that I believe need a different perspective. You commonly hear me say on a regular basis, the amount of illness perpetuates and actually increases dramatically all through the world on every condition from heart disease and cancer and diabetes and everything like that. And it doesn't matter where you go. Yet we have more doctors, hospitals, and everything in history. So a different perspective is needed. And I'm excited for today for many reasons. Not only do I have a concept that set the basis for almost everything that we do in the Wellness Way approach all across the world, but also we have some guests today. As you've seen on a regular basis now, we've had doctors from all the clinics across the country come and visit. We have that today. Plus, I want to share an intern that is started here just a short time ago, and her plans for the future. So we got a lot of stuff to cover today, okay? And the greatest thing is about the different perspective is that's exactly what it wants to do. I believe in a world that is suffering so much today from chronic illness. If we don't have a different perspective, we're going to continue the same insanity that leads people to be mostly sick. And the topic for today is extremely important. Now, before I get started on this topic, I actually want to say hi to a bunch of people that are popping on because I can see people are popping on from all over the world right now. So good morning to all of you guys. I got you guys, you can see right here. I do really appreciate your comments. And at the end, what I will probably do, because this is such an important topic, this doesn't happen in a lot of these, but I want to actually have you write some questions down and I will answer some questions at the end. I don't want this to go for 3 hours because that's sometimes what our question and answer goes to. But I do want to address some of your questions that you guys have on this. So even if you have questions going into it, I believe that I'm going to answer some of them just by what I'm going to go through today. But on the flip side, write some things down as I go through if I stimulate some thought on a different perspective for you, and then ask them at the end. So Brandon and Uriah and the media team here will actually ask some of them, so they'll be watching some of them, marking some of them. So here we go. Our topic for today, obviously, is the thyroid. Now, the reason why you saw my intro video this week about this is the understanding of this and other things, but mainly the thyroid, started to really get me to look and come up with some of the major principles that we do have today, which is very important because unlike most thyroid talks, I'm not going to get on here and say, here, do this and this and this. No. What I'm going to do is very different. I'm going to set the stage today with 2 light bulb moments, okay? So first of all, you say, well, Doc, in most of the different perspective, you actually had 1 light bulb moment. Well, when it came to the thyroid that set up all the hormonal things that I think about today, there was actually 2 light bulb moments. And it led to some of the analogies that we have in the Wellness Way still today that started a long time ago. But what also did, it set the basis to, like I said before, what gave me the nickname, the Hormone Whisperer. And it's going to floor you that once I go through this whole concepts, and I'm saying concepts because there's 2 of them, that it will blow your mind away how I even got the name, the Hormone Whisperer. So let's go through this. So I want to bring you back, for some of you guys that don't know this, is just Christy's story. For all you guys that were at the I Disagree book launch, I used this slide because it was pertinent to my growth as a practitioner, but also set the stage for a lot of hormonal things. See, when Christy had issues, okay? When you have endometriosis, so if you're a woman out there that has endometriosis, there is a general theme when it comes to endometriosis. There's actually some estrogen dominance. So what I started to do like crazy, I started, okay, listen, the internet was just, getting its momentum going this way. It was in 1999, because once again, Christy and I met July 30th of 1999. And it was kind of cool because all of a sudden I started to jump on the internet. I started to read, research articles. I started to read, the things that they're saying about hormone, all the research that way. And I came across an article that was published, I think, in 1998. Okay? Yes, 1998. And actually, it came from the Journal of Steroids. Okay? So, and it was interesting because I was just reading about it because I was trying to look up all the estrogen things. And not only was that the time that I said, oh my goodness, there's more than one estrogen, which was a mind-blowing thing right there, because once again, we are even taught in school that there's 3 major estrogens, and actually there's a lot more than that. That's a whole different topic if you're watching for your first time. But then, look at the article itself. I started to go, oh my goodness, the topic itself, sex hormone binding globulin. Now what is that? Let's just stop there and set the stage. Well, if you have any of the anabolic hormones like estradiol, so if you're a woman, or testosterone if you're a male, sex hormone binding globulin is the vehicle, the car, the protein globulin that carries your sex hormones through the body in circulation. Because once again, they need to be attached to a carrier protein. Well, if it's estradiol, it's a sex hormone binding globulin, all right? So think of it this way. It'd be like this. It's like I left my house and I drove here to come into the office. Well, to get from my house to the office, I need my car. So therefore, my car was the binding globulin. I was the hormone that jumped inside and carried me to the office, which let's say is the cell. Okay, so let's say my house is the organ that made the hormone. It drove me over in the car, which is the binding globulin. So testosterone actually can attach to that, and it's carried through the bloodstream. But let's continue with the title: sex hormone binding globulin and thyroxine binding globulin hormone. In once again, in all the hormone problems that come about. So I'm like, wait, there's a thyroid binding globulin. That blew my mind away, because here's what I'll tell you, and our intern will talk about this a little bit today. We didn't learn this stuff in school. We didn't. And basically, I'm kind of disappointed in our education today, okay? Just even medically or chiropractically or naturopathically or nutrition-wise that way, because they don't really give you a great perspective of how the body works. And so I went through all my schooling. I'm in my last trimester of school. I went through my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, all things like this, and all of a sudden I'm in my graduate school. I've never even heard of the thyroid binding globulin. And I'm like, so there's a thyroid binding globulin. I'm like, okay, there's a factor now. What this whole article talks about is the fact that the estrogen levels can now have a major effect on the thyroid. Because what it can do is, yes, the estrogen can bind to sex hormone binding globulin, but it also can bind to thyroid binding globulin. And that means there's less thyroid hormone circulation. That blew me away. Because now I'm like, wait, if there's a problem with your estrogens, there's automatically a problem with your thyroid. Now you see where I'm going with this. And it just blew my mind away. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm like, and so that's why if you look and you go back, I wish I would have done it today, but I forgot all about it, to tell you the truth. I need to show you a picture of Christy when I met her. She was 25 pounds heavier than when I actually met her. And then when I started to actually reverse these processes, she went down to roughly 107 pounds, okay? And we were trying to get her to lose weight. But the idea is her estrogen levels start to normalize, and then the effect on the thyroid actually started to go down, so her metabolic rate and everything changed. And I should show you some pre and post pictures on there. And she's always, you say, well, Doc, when she was only 130 pounds. I know that. But you go from 130 pounds to 107, it's a dramatic difference. And you can see the picture of when we met to when we got married, which was only 2 years later. It was a dramatic difference. She looked dramatically different. Okay? And I may have to post those pre and post pictures. I did it at the I Disagree book event, but maybe I'll share those with you guys today. It's a wonderful thing, because what happened was this: the effect of her estrogen levels dramatically affect her thyroid. So I'm thinking, because I wasn't taught, I'm thinking, well, that means, for example, if there's any thyroid issue, there might be some estrogen issues that way. Okay? So now I get into clinical practice. A lot of people don't know this. My initial clinical practice was actually about children. It was, because it was more related to my health story. But then as I started to actually take care of children and figure out the things I was doing with Christy, with all the hormonal things that way, a woman looked at me, and she was saying, well, this could work for our things. And I started to get some labs in that way. Well, then all of a sudden, one day, very shortly after that, a young lady came in. And what is interesting, she actually told me, with all the things she was going on, she thought she had a thyroid problem. So they measured her thyroid. And she was actually couldn't get any results with what she was going on. So that's why she ended up coming in. Now, that's one thing, guys, I want you to understand is I can honestly tell you, in all the years of practice, there has been very rare exceptions where anybody has ever came to a wellness way, or me or our doctors initially. I can tell you that 99.9% of the time, a person has gone through a certain perspective and now they're looking for something different because there has been major clinical failure. It's why I believe there needs to be that different perspective. So let me show you what happened. This young lady came in and it was kind of interesting. And all of a sudden she goes, okay, I've had my thyroid tested. So here we go. Where did it all begin? Well, all of a sudden, she actually had multiple things going on. She had rheumatoid at a very young age. But then guess what? If you know anything about the basics of the thyroid, we're going to get into detail of it that way. But the gold standard, especially 20 years ago when I started, they measured one value and one only. You understand, it wasn't until the last 5 years that they actually started to actually increase the number of values, which is still incomplete. But the idea is this young lady came in and her TSH was at 168. 168. Now, if you know what it goes, it roughly back when I started practice, the range went from basically 1 to actually 5.2 roughly. Now, that has changed dramatically today. Now it roughly goes from, I've seen values from 0.5 to 3, 0.5 to 4.5. But in general, it should be roughly around that 2 to 3 mark as it fluctuates through the day. All right? So I don't care what you're at. 168 was ridiculous. And I was like, okay. And their basic concept for them was the fact that they put them on Synthroid. Levothyroxine this time didn't exist yet, okay? So Synthroid was the major medication. Levothyroxine and Synthroid are the same. We're going to go through that shortly, but it was basically the same. So she was on medication, all right? And then, so here was me, as naive as a practitioner, because not a joke, guys. I'm always going to share with you my clinical experience. So this kind of threw me off a little bit, because as I was reading, medical research, and because once again, the steroid article that way, the journal wasn't a natural article. It was actually based on medications and based on manipulation of different hormones and things like that. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking, me being naive and 24, 25 years old going, well, guess what? They probably then assessed what threw her thyroid off. Well, guess what? This is all they had. And it floored me. I was like, you're missing something. You're missing, once again, what's going on with your estrogen levels that way. And it was kind of blown away because I was going, oh my goodness, where was the estrogen levels? And it took me back. And it's interesting because I'm going to come back to this slide right here. I popped up something right here. This young lady was on some form of birth control, and it was an estrogen-based birth control. Because back 20 years ago, a lot of birth controls were estrogen. They're not as much today, but they are significantly estrogen back then. And once again, so that's why even though that she was on a medication, to fast forward, she was taking some estrogen at 20 years old because she was dramatically sick. She had PMS and other symptoms that were going on, skin problems, sound very familiar to what my wife was going through. But what happen is they were giving her birth control to try to control them, but then by nature, that caused her thyroid to go crazy. And that's why when I sat there and back, I remember sitting with labs going, why didn't they measure the estrogen levels? Why didn't they? Why is their perspective that they only measured TSH? And I started thinking about it. There's some major things that are a big misnomer when it comes to the thyroid. Because their gold standard for everything, even today, is still TSH. It's not that they don't measure some other things today. It's just that TSH itself, for example, is what? Is still a major factor. If you actually speak to any medical professional that way, they will still base most of their medications, even if they do anything like Nature's Their Armor, which is more of a alternative method to it that way. What happens is this, they're still so focused on that. So what we're gonna do now is this. I'm gonna take a step back and I'm gonna talk about a little bit of the anatomy. I'm gonna talk about some of the things that are produced by the thyroid. And some of the revelations I was like going, this makes absolutely no sense to what they even still do today. So, Brandon, let's see our studio. All right. Here we go, got my markers now. How are we doing there, Brandon? Okay, so now, what I'm going to do is this, I'm just going to go through just basically the thyroid itself and kind of like where it is and what it does. But if you can see, obviously, we better put some eyes on here. There we go. Let's do this. There we go. Should we give him blue eyes? Her blue eyes. Let's give her blue eyes. There we go. Thank you, Ross, for the drawing that way. Okay, the thyroid actually sits and actually wraps around the throat. By nature, the thyroid in Latin stands for shield. It actually goes over the throat. It doesn't wrap all the way around. It wraps around about 3/4 of the esophagus that way, but it sits right in the neck, all right? And what it does is this. So what is TSH? Well, TSH itself is just simple, okay? What is it? It stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, I want you to think about that. Where is it produced? It's not produced in the thyroid. Let me say it again. It's not produced there. Everybody knows now it's actually produced up in the brain, and actually it stimulates the thyroid to actually release some hormones. Okay? Now, I want you to think about this. This is how, to me, how asinine this is. Do you know that the thyroid gland is the only endocrine gland that they measure a brain hormone to actually deviate its care? Let me explain that. So they will actually base still today, they won't even really care about the thyroid hormones itself, and I'll explain them in a second. They will use their medication, Synthroid, levothyroxine, any of the alternatives that way. They will base everything on TSH for the brain and its activity with the thyroid. That would be like this. So women, for example, you guys have ovaries. Okay, so let's say this is the ovary. Okay, there's a brain hormone that tells it how to work called FSH and LH. But see, what happens is because there's usually a singular hormone like progesterone and LH that they can actually correlate to that way, they just replace LH. Well, the reason why, and this is clinically why, and this, I know you've never been explained this, no one ever explains this. The reason why TSH is the gold standard because they can give one medication to manipulate one thing because there's multiple hormones produced by the thyroid. Okay? I want you to get that concept. It's why it's the gold standard for everything, because if they can manipulate and get you to think that TSH is the major thyroid hormone and it's the basis for everything, then I can give you one thing to manipulate one hormone that comes from the brain, and that is the basis for thyroid. That's ludicrous. That's why, for example, they will never figure it out. Because TSH itself, it's not a thyroid hormone. It's produced in the brain. So for minimally 15 years of practice, I actually had people come in and they told me that their thyroid was bad, and they've never measured one simple thyroid hormone. Think about that. Do you understand that when I first started practice, that to get a doctor to even think about thyroid hormones was actually massively devastating? Because they're like, no, because everything is based on the manipulation of TSH, because that's what happens. Our standard of care today still is based on manipulation of a brain hormone, okay? Now, you say, Doc, well, what hormones are produced from there? Well, there's several. Just in general, there's something called T4. In general, there's something called T3. We're gonna go through these. And there's also something called reverse T3, okay? There's also something called calcitonin, which most of you guys have never heard of before. There's also a gland on back of the thyroid called the parathyroid that produces the parathyroid hormone that way. Okay, so when you look at some of these, we just look at these four alone right here, guess what happens? The medication doesn't actually change those things. And the funny part is, if you look at Synthroid itself, Synthroid is nothing but a synthetic T4. That's all it is. It's a synthetic replacer of T4. Well, that's why, once again, now if they can actually, because this is the major hormone produced, it's by far the most significant one produced by the thyroid. So therefore, this levels kind of correlate together. So if they can actually create a manipulation of T4, a synthetic replacer, then they can manipulate that. And they say, okay, listen, the thyroid's doing better. That's ludicrous. That's actually ridiculous. To tell people that their thyroid is doing better because they synthetically gave the major hormone, because how it roughly goes, about 80% of our thyroid production is actually T4. So they say, okay, listen, we're gonna replace that with a synthetic version that way, and then we're gonna calm this down, because then when TSH gets high, like it did in that young lady, when it gets to 180, 160, or even it gets to 7 or 8, they're going to synthetically replace this never ask why it's off, never ask why the thyroid isn't producing it, never ask should it be producing it in the first place, which is a big key. And then guess what happens? This goes down and they're like, it's a great success. Well, that makes no clinical sense, because here's what happens. This itself, once again, is only one of the hormones made by the thyroid. It's why, once again, it's why if they actually had to truly take care of the thyroid and replace it, you'd have to use 6 different hormones, because there's at least 6. To give you an idea, if you want to know all 6 of them, these 4 plus T2 and T1, which I guarantee you guys have never heard of that way. So imagine that if they were going to medically take care of it, they would have to give you 6 medications just to actually get the thyroid replacement. Well, that once again, no one would do that. If you have an ovary and you want to produce progesterone, they just give you progesterone. So they don't really care about the hormone that stimulates progesterone production. But when it comes to the thyroid, they're all about TSH, because if they can convince you that if TSH is normal, your thyroid is normal, guess what happens? They don't have to tell you that I have to really give you 6 hormones or even measure those 6 hormones. Okay? Let's go back here. So, Uriah, do me a favor. Can you erase what I wrote up there? Keep the picture. Okay. So let's go over this. All right. So I want to show you, as we continue to go through this, one of the major things that is a great revelation is TSH is not a thyroid hormone. Not one bit. Okay. It has very little. Let me say this, and this is totally contradictory to natural medicine. It's totally contradictory to medicine itself. It's totally contradictory to functional medicine. I'm not saying it's not a value that has to be measured, but it's actually a very poor assessment of how the thyroid works, because it's not a thyroid hormone. All right. Now, here's where I had then my first light bulb moment. Okay, because as I was going through this, number one, here's what happens. The current medical testing, even done today by any medical professional, is very incomplete. Let's go back to even estrogens itself. As you guys have heard me talk about, when I realized that estrogen was a term that actually encompassed multiple hormones, and I realized that nobody had measured them, that was like, women were like kind of blown away. I'm like, and I'm going, wait, you need to understand the whole ingredients of a cake if you're going to make it. So if we don't measure all the estrogen levels, guess what happens? It's a very incomplete picture of them and what a woman's body is going to function like. So go back to the thyroid itself. What I started to do is said, okay, listen, now the thyroid itself testing by far is incomplete. So every medication that they were giving women themselves was what? Incomplete. Because here, if you look, just like I showed you up there, T4 is the primary hormone produced, but it's not the only one. There's also T3. There's also reverse T3. There's T1. There's T2. There's calcitonin. Okay, calcitonin just once again inhibits the breakdown of calcium in the bones. Okay, parathyroid hormone actually increases the release of calcium from the bones. These 2 hormones once again regulate the majority of our calcium in our bloodstream that way. So it's now calcitonin. Just to give you an idea, calcitonin is ever really high in your body, it's usually a bad day, because there's usually some thyroid cancer, because the cells of the thyroid are affected dramatically, and then calcitonin goes crazy. So it's actually a pretty decent cancer marker for the thyroid itself. Now, that would be nice to measure as those cells start to change before a huge tumor grows. That's one thing that's great about testing. It gives you a very complete picture. But once again, honestly, ask your doctor, once again, if they've ever measured those. You're going to find out that they don't. Now, just to let you guys know, T1 and T2 are extremely hard to lab test. They barely ever do it, because once again, it's very difficult to do. So that's why you won't see T1 and T2 on a blood test. Once again, because it's really, really difficult to actually get an accurate level that way. So they don't measure it. So I kind of understand why they don't. But just even get people to measure the complete aspect, including reverse T3. People's like, Doc, what's that? We'll get to that. All right. So now, if you just understand that, and this relates to everything. So when I went back to that initial aspect of when I looked at that article and talking about estrogen levels and thyroid binding globulin, because there we go again, thyroid binding globulin. See, if you look at even how these hormones are actually transferred through the body, you need that binding protein. So therefore, if you don't measure that, you have an incomplete view of how the thyroid's actually working. Which leads me to the second part of the light bulb moment. Because first of all, it was extremely incomplete. But second, here's what happens. How can Synthroid or levothyroxine replace all of these? It can't. See, that's the part. So right now, if you're taking some form of levothyroxine or Synthroid, your care is not only incomplete, but also your testing has to be. Because if you measure all of the levels of the thyroid, you're going to find out that the majority of them are abnormal. And one thing is this, and TSH could even be normal, even when you're taking Synthroid or levothyroxine. So what I want you to do is get things properly tested. I'm going to show you at the end how to properly test the thyroid. All right? Now, here's the cool thing is this. But there's one thing that part 2, another patient came in. All right? So let's go back to my early career of taking care of patients. So all of a sudden, another person came in, and they were dealing with some thyroid issues, and they were actually taking Synthroid because this time levothyroxine wasn't on the market yet, and it was kind of neat. So we decided to look up the contraindications for Synthroid and levothyroxine. Now, here's the cool part. I want you to think about this. This is something you can look up on any medical website, on any of your drug websites that way. It kind of blows my mind away. Please do me a favor. I understand that sometimes medications are needed. I've actually told people sometimes they need medications. If you've had your thyroid removed, you need a medication, either in the form of Nature Thyroid or Armor, which is a safer venue, which has multiple hormones besides levothyroxine and Synthroid. But here's what happens. There still is contraindications. What does that mean? That means if you have this, you cannot take this medication. Well, I want to show you a couple things on here that were actually kind of mind-blowing to me because it set up the stage for actually my second light bulb moment that started young in my career. So I started to read about the contraindications of the medications because when a person came in to the office, I wanted to make sure that the medication wasn't creating any negative side effects. Well, here's a contraindication for any thyroid medication, obviously Synthroid and levothyroxine. It's contraindicated in patients with untreated subclinical suppressed serum TSH levels or normal T3 and T4. Wait. Let's just say this. Do you understand that you're listed on the medication list forever since I actually started doing this? It always said that it's contraindicated if you have normal T4, T3 levels. Well, hold the phone. How can you actually know there's a contraindication if you've never measured them in the first place? And actually today, fast forward today, they started measuring a little bit of T4 and T3, but here's what happens. Then because of insurance and because of what they're trying to do clinically, they moved everything to free T4 and free T3, which is a whole nother story. And it doesn't say contraindicated for free T4 and free T3, it says contraindicated for T3 and T4, which today most people are bypassing. Don't do that. That's an incomplete view. All right? So now, or overt hypotoxicity, anxiety of patients with acute myocardial infarction. Okay? What does that mean? That means if you had a heart attack, you got to be careful about taking levothyroxine or Synthroid. It blows my mind. Why? Why do you have to be worried about it? Because if your thyroid goes into a hyper state, it increases your heart rate once again. And therefore, blood pressure and other things go up and it can cause a big time heart issue. It's why, once again, there is a synthetic T3 medication, which is the most active form of the thyroid. And what it does, actually, it used to start out and you had to actually take it under hospital supervision. Now they give it out by prescription. Because if you increase the heart rate too heavily, that can cause a heart attack. So if you already have a weakened heart or a past history of heart disease, you're not supposed to take this medication. Do you know how many people today, especially ladies that have had heart attacks or gentlemen that have had heart attacks, take this medication? It's significant. Last estimates that I wrote about people that have been diagnosed with thyroid problems is over 40 million. I guarantee out of those 40 million, there's been some people that have had heart issues. And it can accelerate them by increasing the heart rate. Because that's what the major jobs does. It increases your heart rate. All right? But now, watch this. It is contraindicated in patients with uncorrected adrenal insufficiency. All right. And here's what happens. I'm going to jump ahead to the slide and I'm going to come back. If you go to the current list on the PDR, on the physician desk reference, and see the contraindications, the number one contraindication still today is adrenal insufficiency. How does adrenal insufficiency exist? It exists when you're majorly stressed out. Now why? Why would they actually say if your adrenals are weak, you can't take the thyroid medication? Because here's what happens. The thyroid and the adrenals directly are indirectly connected, which means if the heart rate goes up, if the thyroid goes up, the adrenals have to go down. Why? Because they both increase the heart rate. Once again, do this. If I were to attack you right now, if I was sitting next to you, if I was to attack Uriah, what happens is, by nature, his adrenals are going to get stressed out, and guess what happens? His heart rate's going to go up. And guess what organ now the body's very smart about? It does it intelligently. It actually decreases its activity. Your thyroid. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. Ladies, gentlemen, but let's start ladies because I've taught you so much through the years that mental stress will destroy you. Do you understand? Sometimes, and the majority of times, especially with women, their thyroid is low because their adrenals are stressed out. Let me say it again. Their thyroid is low and it's protecting the heart. Because if you're really stressed out, the adrenals and the thyroid can't go up together. If the adrenals and thyroid go up together, you can induce an aortic rupture. Okay? See, so that they're antagonists to each other. One goes up, the other one must go down. See, that's why when all of a sudden you can see hypothyroid symptoms and TSH and stuff like that is normal, it's because the adrenals are skyrocketed, cortisol levels are very elevated, and then guess what happens? The thyroid goes, I gotta shut down. But here's what happens. All of a sudden, if you now go through the hypothyroid symptoms, you go to a doctor, they never check your adrenals. So let me ask you a question. If you ever taken levothyroxine, Synthroid, or even more of a natural form of Nature the Armor, have you ever had your adrenals tested first? I know what your answer is. I have yet. Let me say it again. I have yet to see anybody come in with a proper adrenal test, checking where they're at before they've ever taken a thyroid medication. And here's what happens. Look it up. Ask your doctor. They're clueless. They have no idea. They don't. They're not taught it. Come on, doc, it's listed on the medication list. You're right, but they don't understand that. They are taught, give this for this purpose. And then monitor TSH, and this is how it's going to come down, and then they're in good thyroid function. That's our basic medical concept of the thyroid. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It makes no clinical sense. You're not even following the basic aspects where you can actually hurt somebody. If you haven't had your adrenals tested, and they're insufficient, and you're taking a thyroid medication, that doctor's hurting you unknowingly. Come on now. This is the kind of care that we call, and they're the experts. The experts in what? That's the part that frustrates me. They don't even understand the basic biochemistry of how the thyroid works and how it can be affected by so many things, yet people are out there going, my doctor said. I don't give a shit what your doctor said. Because once again, you're going to find out I can give you thousands upon thousands of patients that are being hurt every day by this. So if you're taking Synthroid levothyroxine, you got on the phone right now and you call your doctor and say, why the hell do you have me on this and you didn't test my adrenals? It's the basics of biochemistry. It's the basics of these two organs working together. See, it's frustrating because guess what happens? Because if you do raise the thyroid, and guess what it does? It will suppress the adrenals. Ladies, it's why you can actually take levothyroxine and still feel like hell. Still feel like things are bad. Because it drives your adrenals down. But guess what? Your TSH starts to go back to normal. Well, of course it does. Put a synthetic hormone, every level shows back normal. But what it does to the adrenals and other organs is dramatically detrimental to your body. You got to understand this. This is the part that frustrates me so much when people say, my doctor said. Well, you tell them that I said this. Come on. And then share this video to them. Do me a favor right now. Everybody needs to know this concept just in general. Share what I'm doing right now. Take a minute, share this video to your Facebook. Share it to your YouTube. Because why? Because just this alone will make a dramatic change in just how the thyroid's viewed in the first place. Now, we've only gotten through a part of this. Second of all, here we go. All right. Now, once again, it talks about all the great things. Now, once again, also, if you have blood sugar problems, all right, here's one thing. Synthroid is contraindicated in patients with hypersensitivity to any of the inactive ingredients. Let me say that again. Synthroid is contraindicated in patients with hypersensitivity, aka allergies, aka type 1, 2, 3, and 4, to any of the ingredients, inactive ingredients. So let me see a question. Before your doctor actually gave you levothyroxine, did they actually test your adrenals? Number two, did they test you for any of the hypersensitivities, aka allergies, to any of the ingredients in there? Let me answer your question because I already know the answer. Or let me give you the answer because I already know it. No, they didn't. Okay? So when we do allergy testing from type 1 and type 2 and things, what happens is this. I can honestly tell you, I want to say thank you to Walgreens. You say, Doc, you're saying thank you to a drug pharmacy. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Do you know why? Because here's what happened. And I have to thank Dan Walters for this, okay? Because he's actually a pharmacist, a very close friend of mine, okay? Now, Dan Walters told me this, okay? He said, listen, he goes, pharmacists are really smart, and they actually are, okay? He goes, if you send the allergy test to the pharmacist, they can make it without the allergens. And I was like, really? I didn't even know that. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, cool. Because there are some times, and let me say this again, especially if you've had surgery or have had your thyroid radioactive iodine destroyed it that way, you may need a medication the rest of your life. I can't say you don't. I would actually encourage you to do, once again, Nature Thyroid or Armor. But what happens is this, is if you're on a medication because you need it because you did have surgery, then you need to be on something. But they can actually do it without it. And Walgreens did. I was like, that's pretty awesome. Do you know why? Because the pharmacist is like, I don't want you reacting to the ingredients because the reaction itself can cause an autoimmune process, and we'll get to that shortly. See, just those things alone dramatically separate us in the way we think in a different perspective on the thyroid itself, and all we're talking about is the basic medication they give out like candy for everybody when it comes to their thyroid problems. And this is endocrinology 101 for medicine. You know what I'm saying? Makes no sense. See, that's the tough part you're going to struggle with. You're going to struggle with going, it makes so much darn sense. Well, guess what? I'm going to throw some monkey wrenches in there, so hang in there with me. Because this is what I had to do. I had to do this as a young practitioner going, none of this makes sense, but then how do I explain this? Well, so therefore, what am I showing you on this? I'm showing you, for example, this. I'm showing you that not only, for example, can the adrenals affect the thyroid, not only can the brain affect the thyroid, but also your immune system and foods. So that's where the biggest revelation in hormones came to me by far. And this perspective, I'm going to say it today for the first time ever on the show, okay? And I've never said this publicly. But here's the cool thing is this. Conjugation. My other light bulb moment. So number 2 light bulb moment. The thyroid is never a primary problem. Never. So let me say this. If you are trying to address the thyroid, you have absolutely no clue what you're doing when it comes to the thyroid. Because the thyroid is never a primary problem. Well, doc, wait, the adrenals, it's secondary. Doc, the immune system, the thyroid's secondary. Doc, the brain, it's all secondary. A hormone itself by nature is called a messenger, okay? That means there has to be a message first. A doctor's job, a teacher's job, because that's what doctor stands for, is to teach you where all of those primary things can come from. So here's what I'm going to tell you publicly. I got nicknamed by women called the hormone whisperer. And I can honestly tell you, in 20 years of practice and teaching doctors all over the world, I've never addressed a hormone once ever in my life. Because hormone problems are always secondary, tertiary, and quad problems. They're never primary. See, so when people say, I'm a hormone specialist, I'm like, then you're clueless. Because hormones are never a primary problem. You may be able to manipulate them synthetically or naturally for a short time, but they are all secondary. Every time. So there's no such thing as a thyroid problem. None. Period. Well, doc, none. The thyroid is always a secondary, if not down the line. Because let's do this. You say, doc, but the adrenals can have a major effect on the thyroid. You're right. So the adrenals get stressed out by some stressor. So actually the stressor is first, the adrenals are second, and the thyroid's third. See, it's a major cascade. So then think about this. If you address the thyroid, you're going to mess up other organ systems, which led me to my number 1 principle that helped me clinically figure out the things that nobody could 20 years ago, and that's the Swiss watch. Every gear is so intimately connected to everything that way. Oops, I went back there. There we go. Every gear is so intimately connected to every gear to think that, once again, that the thyroid is ever a primary problem. It cannot happen. The anatomy, the physiology, the biochemistry, it doesn't work that way. So if you're walking around telling somebody that you have a thyroid problem, that is a false issue. That is not true. I'm not saying, say, doc, you understand, my T4 and T3, which are actually my thyroid values, are extremely low. I'm going through all the symptoms of it low. I don't disagree with that. But that's not the causal factors. There's multiple organs that are affecting that now can throw that off. And if all you do is synthetically replace it or try to naturally support the thyroid, you're palidating an organ that's responding to other systems in the body. And that was the biggest revelation that I had, and I sat there. And I went and shared this. I went to share this with colleagues and friends. And I was like, listen, the thyroid can't be an issue. They're like, that makes no sense. I'm like, really? Then why is it this can affect it and this can affect it? And by nature, medicine itself says that the majority of thyroid problems are autoimmune, which means, once again, it's not a thyroid problem. It's not even a thyroid problem. There's an immune system problem affecting the thyroid, how it works. So then why is the gold standard for medical practice? Why is the gold standard even for natural practice TSH? I don't get it. Do you? If you can explain it to me and how the biochemistry and physiology works, please do, because I don't get what they're saying. I'm not saying that TSH is not a marker that needs to be measured, but if your basis for thyroid function is based on that, you're biochemically clueless. You are. So if your doctor diagnoses you with a thyroid problem, walk out. Because you know why? He's going to mislead you from a lot more things, and you'll never find out what threw the thyroid off in the first place, ever. So I'm telling you right now, as a hormone whisperer, I have never addressed a hormone in 20 years. I will never address a hormone. I will train our doctors on a repeated basis to show them that hormones respond to what's going on within the environment. And it's our job to find out those things in the environment that actually are doing it in the first place. So, a quote, if all you know is those two concepts, number one, that guess what? The thyroid is not the primary problem. And number two, that the testing in the view of the thyroid is extremely incomplete. That makes you a better understanding of the thyroid than any doctor on the planet. By far. By far. So that's why when people say this, and I'll show you the ridiculous they say. They say these things can't be reversed. No, they can't be reversed because of the way you think. It's the way the doctors think. Do you know how many times I've been told that Hashimoto's can't be reversed? Then why is it I can show you thousands of labs where it has? Why is it that our doctors from all over the world do it? See, because their current level of thinking doesn't let them think about what's going on. And so therefore they can never address a problem with the same level of thinking that led them into that problem. And we don't have a healthcare problem, we have how we view healthcare in the first place. And if we perpetuate and don't have a different perspective, how are we going to do 20 years from now? I've said this, for you guys that watch me, you know I repeat the same things over and over again. I've said the same things for 20 years. I've said the same things for 20 years. I've already talked to my team, and I said, I know what our next book is going to be 5 years from now. It's called I Still Disagree. Because if you don't change the thinking of what's happening with the thyroid, with the infertility, with cancer, diabetes, or anything, we're still going to be in the same level of illness that we are 5 years from now that we are today. It's going to be worse. It's kind of scary. So understanding those two concepts give you a better understanding of the thyroid than any doctor. Share that. You think I'm joking? I have friends that are medical doctors, and I'm at least a jerk enough to look at it and say, you are clueless. You know why I'm direct about it? Because here's what happens. If you're taking Synthroid, levothyroxine, and you haven't had all the proper testing done before, they're physically hurting you inside, and I'm not okay with that, and neither should you. You shouldn't be okay with that. Not one bit, because they can cause great harm from not understanding the basic things of biochemistry. See, the cool thing is this. Go back to that research article that I showed you at the beginning. Medical research and medical practice never match up. Do you know why? There's no money in it. There's no money in it. If I could convince you that you need to take levothyroxine or Synthroid for the rest of your life because the thyroid can't be normalized, no, the thyroid can't be normalized under your care. Your autoimmune process can't be reversed under your care. Humira surpassed Dr. Jeremy Maxwell, an amazing doctor, great friend, amazing man, great husband, great father. Guess what happens? Intense, amazing doctor. Did a wonderful, wonderful video the other day. Please do me a favor. We have amazing doctors all over the country. Please go watch their videos. They're awesome. I'm more of a jerk. You know what I'm saying? I'm more of the man. I'm more of the media team. I'm more of the mean guy. I'm going to take everybody head on that way. Because once again, I get frustrated. I get frustrated because of the suffering. I do. And it's hard for me to do this for so long and not have compassion for the pain that people go through. Dr. Jeremy did a wonderful video where he talked about Humira has now passed statin medications as the #1 medication. Do you know how many billions that is sold per year? And Humira suppresses the immune system. That's all it does. So therefore, instead of suppressing the immune system, why don't you just ask why it's overactive in the first place? See, a different perspective has to happen, because it's a sad thing. Because you ever see Humira as a medication, do you ever see the long negative side effects it causes, including cancer? Who said so? Medication. It's kind of scary, okay? So now, you look at those two concepts, you do. So doc, let's look at some of the other things that can contribute to the thyroid actually being off. Why? What are those primary things? Well, once again, just basic deficiencies. Iodine. If you look at T4 and T3, what is it? It actually stands for tyrosine and 4 iodines and tyrosine and 3 iodines, all right? So therefore, you need tyrosine. Where do you get tyrosine from? Meat. Meat. Now I know, once again, that's why if you ever noticed, you hear this correlation that vegans actually suffer from a lot of thyroid problems. They actually do, because they end up with a lot of deficiencies, all right? Now, they're usually not deficient in iodine because they're pretty good with seaweed and kelp and other iodine-based foods, all right? So it's important to know that iodine is very significant, but not what they teach you. This whole concept that 150 micrograms of iodine is sufficient for the RDAs is absolutely ludicrous. Yes, you may not get a goiter, but you're going to be extremely deficient. Ladies, your breast tissue, iodine protects your breasts from actually estrogens getting out of control, and your breast tissue uses basically 6 milligrams of iodine per day. Look it up, it's crazy. So you use 150, micrograms, you're like 6,000% less than you should be, or 4,000% less you should be, just for your breasts to maintain. That's kind of scary if you think about it that way. So just deficiencies. That's why your foods are so important. You ever look at, that's why they talk about, well, the Japanese don't have much for thyroid problems. Well, because they do a lot of iodine issues that way. They eat a lot of seaweed. They eat a lot of shrimp. They eat a lot of fermented dairies that way. That's really true. Now, they're wrong. Because of the way dairy is done in the United States, dairy scares me. But fermented dairy products are extremely good when it comes to iodine. They're fantastic. Do you know what's really funny? If you look at the things that high in iodine, like an egg, like dairy, like sea vegetables, some of them are animal products. It's why they say that vegans really miss out when it comes to do it. Well, today with technology and internet and Amazon, you can basically get anything you want from all over the world now. It's kind of nice, so it's not hard to do it, okay? Now, here's another thing. Our salt. Get this, guys. Think about this. In order for iodine, even if you eat it, to get into our thyroid itself, so if iodine is floating in our bloodstream, you need sodium and potassium to actually get it into a cell. Every cell in the body has a sodium-potassium pump. It's how it exchanges nutrients, it's how it exchanges minerals, how it exchanges electrons, everything that way. So this concept that salt is bad for you is ridiculous. Wait, hold the phone. Do you understand why they actually put iodine in salt? Because it's a transport system to get it into a cell. That's why it's actually put with salt. Why did they throw iodine and other things that way? Because salt is one of the transfer mechanisms. You need salt. Dr. Andrew McGuire, an amazing doctor in Mequon, Wisconsin, down in the Milwaukee area, he does, if you haven't watched his talk on salt, on how salt is by far the second most needed nutrient we need, by far, okay? Guess what happens? You need to watch it. Watch it on our YouTube channel. He does an amazing job. Salt is so needed. Yeah, but my doctor said I shouldn't take salt because he is clueless. Now, they're wrong. If you're doing Morton salt with iodine, whoo, it has cyanide in there. Don't eat it. It's toxic, okay? It's horrible. See, that's one thing. You eat bad salt, you eat actually processed and chemicalized salt, it can be very detrimental to you, but that's not real salt. Get your good salt. Our favorite, because of what Dr. Andrews researched and studied, that Celtic salt did amazing, okay? Do Celtic salt that way. So, anyways, hold the phone here. Brandon, how are we doing? Good, good. All right. So now, potassium. Make sure that you have your potassium. Because once again, you gotta have sodium potassium pump in there. So deficiencies itself. But on the flip side, Now, there's other things that you can do. Now, it's kind of interesting. If you look at iodine, once again, you say, Doc, we used to get iodine in bread. Yes, we used to. But then some scientists came along and said, wait, our RDAs say 150. We don't want to go above that, so we're going to replace it with bromine. So that's why people don't realize iodine is a very good preserver. It's also antiseptic. Think about this, guys. If you ever had a surgery and woke up and actually saw your skin kind of yellowish purple, you know what they put on your skin? Iodine to sterilize. See, iodine is extremely needed for multiple things in the body, but then they used to put it in breads to actually preserve it so it didn't get infected in mold, didn't get moldy. So what it did, it preserved the bread longer. But then once again, they thought they were going to give you too much iodine because people's consumption of bread. So they put bromine in there. So they've started to put toxins in the thyroid, or toxins in their bread. But here's what happens. There is one toxin that has been thoroughly studied that actually does a really good job of destroying the thyroid. Actually, get this. In the Merck manual, the medical drug company manual, go back as early as the 50s and 60s, they used to use fluoride for hyperthyroidism. Let me say it again. It was a treatment. Fluoride was a treatment for hyperthyroidism. They found out that it actually is absorbed where iodine should be, and they found out they could actually slow the thyroid function down and decrease the production of T4 and T3 by actually putting fluoride in there. And you guys actually believe that the dentists doing fluoride treatments and putting your toothpaste and everything is good for you. Isn't that crazy? But my dentist said, yes, because just like the Swiss watch principle, they may spray fluoride on your teeth and actually your teeth may get better, but when you swallow it, it actually poisons all the rest of your organs. See, medicine, dentistry, all the current thinking actually looks at the body like it's one gear. And if I just look at the teeth, my dentist said, well, your dentist is wrong. Tell him to watch this video. Say because fluoride actually is absorbed greatly by just like because in the halogen production, bromine, chlorine, iodine, fluoride, it's massively absorbed by the thyroid, and now it replaces iodine in that transport system, and now you can't produce thyroid production. Now, there's one food source that does that greatly too. You know what it's called? Soy. Actually, soy is a contraindication to eat if you're taking levothyroxine. I apologize, I didn't pull that up on the contraindications, but guess what happens? You're not supposed to eat soy if you're taking thyroid medication. Who said so? The medication itself. Because once again, it inhibits the thyroid production that way. That's why you look at soy protein isolates, which is not a food, it's a chemical. Please stay away from that. So once again, if you're a vegan, you miss tyrosine. And they actually used to pound soy down because of the protein it had and didn't realize it was so destructive towards your thyroid. See, but it's not a thyroid problem. It's a toxicity problem. It's a deficiency problem. And the thyroid takes a beating from all this that way. Okay? Now, they did a new research on the thyroid, impact of drinking water fluoride on human thyroid hormones. And they found out that, guess what, in 2018, it was kind of cool. Scientific Reports did a great study and showed how that just having fluoride in water massively decreases thyroid function. Guys, if you have fluoride toothpaste right now, please do me a favor. Please throw it out. If you think that your dentist knows what he's talking about when it comes to the thyroid, just because he wants to spray your teeth with fluoride, please do not do that. It's destructive to your organs. And I'm just covering your thyroid. I'm not covering other organs right now. But then once again, there's other toxins: bromine, chlorine, mercury, cadmium. Okay? Cadmium is very common in the environment. So is mercury. If you have a mercury filling, once again, if you have ethyl mercury, it's readily absorbed by the thyroid. Now, why are things so absorbed by the thyroid? Because here's what happens. A lot of people don't know this. The organ that actually gets the most blood is our brain. But guess what's on the way up to the brain? Your thyroid. And the aortic artery supplies the thyroid in both anterior and posterior. And a lot of our blood actually goes through the thyroid first. See, the thyroid has to help us regulate our temperature. And our temperature can't fluctuate terribly a lot. Actually, it can go higher than it can go lower. You start to go hypo, you'll die first of hypo than you ever will hyper, okay? So the idea is this: your body has to create a very constant temperature change that way. It's why, once again, most of the blood flow goes through the thyroid up to the brain. See, so therefore, you put something toxic in your bloodstream, it gets to the thyroid very quickly. And then it absorbs it in there and therefore causes damage. So once again, if you've had mercury fillings and sitting there leaking on that, it can be a toxin that needs to be removed from that organ in order for it to produce normal hormones. Okay, that's one thing that people don't realize. That's why toxins, that's why vaccines, everything. Now, well, doc, something absorbs the thyroid, what happens to the cell? Well, it's why the most common thing that destroys the thyroid isn't this. It's actually this, the immune system. Because the thyroid is bombarded with so many things. So let's say this. Let's say your body absorbs fluorine, okay, fluoride, and actually chlorine, and it gets absorbed by the thyroid. Do you really think that cell inside is the same? No. The cell says, hey, guess what, guys? Guess what? This cell's abnormal. We need the immune system to kill it. Well, wait, doc, the immune system made a mistake and attacked the thyroid. No, it didn't. Your immune system never makes a mistake. That's another concept. Once again, that medicine is perpetuated that the body makes mistakes. It does not make mistakes. It knows exactly what it's doing. It's trying to do everything to survive. It's just that you've beat up the thyroid so much, the immune system says, you don't belong here. It's why thyroid cancers are so prominent today. And so the immune system will now increase dramatically from all of them, and it will start to attack the thyroid. And by nature, that's called Hashimoto's. Now, there's multiple markers that can be tested. I'm going to show you this lab here right now. So here's a 43-year-old woman that came in. Once again, they said her thyroid really had no problem, but her TSH was high. It was at 4.1. So we're just going to give you some medication to lower your TSH. So I said, hold the phone. Before you do that, let's measure all the thyroid hormones, just to even assess to see if you even need the medication. Well, guess what? Her T4 and T3 and reverse T3 and tolls and freeze and that were all normal. Right there, it's contraindicated to give that medication to that person. Who said so? The medication itself. The medication itself. But the doctor looked at her and said, your TSH, even on the lab that he did, is at 4.1. That's too high. You have hypothyroid preclinical things going on. I don't disagree with that. But it's not, by giving a synthetic medication is not going to change it. And on top of it, that medication is going to cause her more harm. So I said, listen, let's figure out what is disrupting your thyroid, because thyroid, remember guys, is never primary. It's never an initial problem. It cannot be. It's biochemically impossible. So we measured her autoantibodies, the thyroid peroxidase antibody and actually the thyroglobulin antibody. And her thyroid peroxidase antibody was at 714. 714, you should be below 60. Now, she took the lab back to her doctor. Took the lab back to her doctor, her endocrinologist. Sorry, I'm going to go on a little rant here, so I got to get a little sip for this one. The doctor looked at her and said, regardless, the autoimmune process is a genetic process, and therefore, you're genetically disposed for this, so it cannot be changed. Oh. All right. No, you can't change it because you don't know how. See, I don't believe, in my personal opinion, that the doctor's a bad guy. I don't. But that's why I seem to sound like a bad guy, because I'm telling them that the doctor, what he did was wrong. Because what he told this person was not only deceptive, it's wrong. Because what he should have said is, I have no clue what to do with them. Because we do. Dr. Greg just did an amazing talk saying autoimmune reversing the curse. And guess what happens, guys? When you try to change people's thinking, the claws come out. We had people on there commenting on Dr. Greg going, it can't be reversed, blah, 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 blah. Guys, guess what? I know some of you guys, and I'm going to be very offensive to some of you guys, but I don't really care if I offend you. Some of you guys cling on to your diseases like they're a part of you. No, they're not a part of you. You created a part of them. So therefore, they can be reversed. The body's just trying to survive. It's trying to survive what you've done to it. No, it's my family history. Well, let me see a question. If your grandpa had high blood pressure, and you had high blood, and your dad did, and now you do you think really it's genetic, or do you think that you're stressing out your body the same way your grandpa and your dad did because you actually got down habits and not genetics? Because grandpa's and dad's genetics are meant for them to live as long as they possibly can to adapt to everything in the world. That's what genes do, okay? So I said, okay, let's do this. So albumin is another marker that carries thyroid hormone, so we show she's deficient. So I said, so what I did was this. I started to find all the things that triggered her immune system. All of them. Because she had plenty of T4 and T3, so I knew she wasn't deficient, okay? So we started to actually find the things that triggered her immune system, like her foods. And one of her foods, get this, was kale. One of her foods was avocado. Now, you say, Doc, you love kale. Not for her. Doc, you love avocado. Not for her. Guess what happened? We also did a stool test. And she had some yeast overgrowth and some immunocompromised things and a little Klebsiella that way. And we started to actually have her avoid things that disrupt and trigger her immune system. We actually started to reverse her process of using toxic things like processed bread that has bromine in. She stopped actually doing fluoride toothpaste. We did all the markers that I'm going to show you that we started to pull away. And then lo and behold, only in 2 months, because I saw her inflammation stuff start to come down, I redid her lab, and her TSH went from 4.1 to 2.7, and her thyroid peroxidase antibody went from 714 to 106. And I said, now, take this lab, go talk to your doctor, and tell her that Dr. Flynn changed your genetic pool. Now, as everybody in the media team just started laughing, I didn't change their gene pool. Actually, what I did is actually cause their genes not to respond in a way that could be detrimental to their body. Do you understand? If they would have actually put this woman on levothyroxine, they could have hurt her. Now, this woman is doing absolutely amazing. She is very vibrant, very healthy. Her autoantibodies are back down to normal. She gets tested by us once a year to see, for example, where she's at. She's continually actually taking the things away from her thyroid that could actually do what? That could disrupt it, that could actually cause her immune system to go up. She's lost about 30 pounds. Was I trying to do any of that stuff? No. Remember, I wasn't trying to make her thyroid work differently. I understand that the thyroid is nothing more than a secondary problem, and the thyroid has to adapt to all the changes, and the hormones have to actually now respond to all the stressors. That's the key. That's the big key. It's time to actually find out all the things that can stress out the body. Okay, now, once again, what other things can do it? Viruses. Viruses itself. Epstein-Barr. Okay, hepatitis. Man, you know, influenza. Okay, all these things can actually go into the thyroid. They want to use those cells in DNA to actually do what? Replicate. Okay, vaccines themselves, especially live ones, they're full of ethyl mercury. They're full of viruses that way. Some of them that are live, it's the live ones that can cause the biggest problem, not the attenuated ones. But that's common. Heck, in 2 months from now, guess what? There's going to be this boogeyman called the flu virus coming around. And if you really believe that, you need to really research about that, because they're going to now come up with some BS bug that's going to come around, and guess what happens? It's going to affect people. Okay? And they're going to inject people with live viruses that can damage their thyroid itself. Actually, it's kind of funny. If you have an autoimmune condition, you're contraindicated from getting any shot because it disrupts the immune system that way. Who said so? The vaccine itself. See, it's kind of crazy when you actually start to understand how these systems work, how it makes no sense. So there's a ton of viruses that actually can do it. But viruses, your body has to be compromised first. Once again, we need to actually always look at the things that are compromised in our body and do those things. But virus itself, when you can test for those, foods, it's one of the most basic things that can create that. And it could be the most healthy things. Yes, by nature, guys, it's not a joke. Stay away from gluten, dairy, corn, and soy, and you're going to automatically be much better. You know, I'm watching so many people talk about different diets that way. I'm going, listen, I don't care what diet it is. Guess what? If you just avoid those 4 things, you're going to be better off. But that woman that actually, if she would have done keto, if she would have done paleo, which once again, I have no problem with those. Actually, I'm actually kind of a fan of more fatty acid-based foods than proteins, and obviously the lowest you can keep your sugars, the better, of all the kinds, with the exception of greens. You need lots of greens, some good fats, and some proteins, okay? But the key thing is this. Make sure you're not having fatty acids and proteins and actually the carbohydrates like kale, like that woman had, that could actually be detrimental to your health. How do you know? We don't guess, we test. That's the big key. So if you look at all thyroid reversals that we've had, and I could give you thousands of them from all over the world, it came down to looking at all the factors that can affect the thyroid. That's the big key. The immune system, mental stress, medications itself. All these things perpetuate what happens with the thyroid itself. And that's the biggest thing. So if you can get the concept of understanding that, guess what? The testing is incomplete. And second of all, that it's never a primary problem, you will be able to figure out why this gland is being affected and how to create a normal thyroid gland. That's the key. See, the key is like thinking like a carpenter. See, remember, I've always used this analogy. Fire department carpenter doctors. A carpenter looks and goes, okay, guess what? There's a problem with thyroid. Well, guess what? There's multiple things that throw it off. We need to rebuild all the system, rebuild all the house. You just don't take an old broken down house and build one room out. It makes no sense. You need to go after all the house because it's all affected. Go back to the Swiss watch principle. So what's the biggest key that separates everything? Here it is. What do you need to do? You need to get tested properly. Now, if you look at this list. That's how you test the thyroid. Look at this. Look at it. It's a long list, is it not? How is it that TSH can be the only level that really affects these things? It's not. Your estrogen levels are on there, your insulin levels, your cortisol levels, your ferritin, your iron levels. Guys, to convert T4 to T3, you need ferritin, you need iron. Okay? So women, if you're iron deficient, literally, Nicole had a patient yesterday. This is the great thing. She came from Milwaukee because she's been watching our hormonal stuff that way, and I got to talk to her. She's a sweetheart. She has menstruated for years straight. Her hemoglobin was down to 0.44. After a blood transfusion, it went up to 8. Guys, you want to be well above 50. She menstruates every single day. Ladies, I understand it. And the doctor said, all you can do is pull out your uterus. No, that's all you can do is pull out her uterus. Because they made no clinical sense of why she was bleeding in the first place. And just by removing your uterus is not the reason what's going to get rid of it. Because not every lady bleeds 2 years straight. Right, ladies? So the concept of just removing that organ still leaves the problem in the other gears that are bad that led to you just bleeding every day, because hormone problems are never primary, even if it's ovaries, even if it's adrenals, anything. See, that concept right there, doctors all over the world have such a hard time with. They do, especially people that specialize in them. Well, guess what? That's why they can't figure out infertility. That's why they can't figure out the cycle. That's why they can't figure out any female hormone problem, because they're focused on female hormones. I can tell you in 20 years, I've never focused on female hormones, ever. Say, doc, but you're known as a hormone whisperer. Yes, because I listen to the whispers of the body, the physiology, the anatomy, the biochemistry, and I look at it from a different perspective, and I listen, I say, you're doing this for a reason. There's something that the body is very smart, and it says, hey, listen, doc, I'm doing this. And I got that concept 20 years ago, and it led to what we're doing today. And it starts with testing it right. Trust me, guys, you can understand so much about the thyroid itself. You can understand that, guess what? Get T4, T3, free T4, free T3, TBG, all the antibodies tested, things like that. But if you're constantly doing things just to address the thyroid, you'll never figure it out. You'll never figure it out. It's impossible. That's not how the body works. The body works like the Swiss watch, and all those things conglomerately work together on a regular basis. And that's the exciting part, because once you can start to see those clinical changes, docs, it will blow your mind away. When you look at a patient that is told by every doctor that her autoimmune markers cannot go down, and it does. Now, once again, the funny part is that doctor looked at the woman that actually saw that alone that way, and she goes, well, I just don't know what to do with it. Why didn't you say that from the first place? Because most of you guys have been told things can't be done, and you never look for a different perspective. That's why I ask you. Why I prepare. I was here at 4 in the morning, out close to 5. Got up at 3:45, got here right after 4 in the morning that way, and prepared how to share these ideas with you that, once again, that you can look up. You can go through everything I said today and go, listen, share what you think. Do me a favor. If you love what I'm saying, please do me a favor. Put a nice green heart in the comments for me. Please like and share this, because if we do not share information like this, people are going to get hurt. They always do. They even say it gets hurt. Who said so? The medication itself. So from that perspective, always remember this. You need to stop listening and start learning. Stop listening to what people do and start learning. And the cool thing is when you start to learn, the videos that I put out, the videos that Dr. Jeremy, the videos that Dr. Sampson, the videos that Dr. Dennis, the video that all the doctors across the country put out will make great clinical sense. But it's because they're coming from a different perspective. Now, we have an office that's going to be opening on Monday out in Louisville, Colorado. It's northwest of Denver. I'm going to bring up Dr. Shannon Bundy and her husband, Zach, can come on up. And I want them to introduce themselves to you that way. I'm going to step aside like I always do. I want them to share who they are and stuff, and they can share a little stuff about them. But this young lady, this doc here, is going to be tearing it up and doing all this information. She's been here all week. She has been on overload. She may share that with you and what she's learned this week and what she learned as a Wellness Way team itself. But I just want you to hear from another amazing doc, but also a great husband that, for example, sat here toe-to-toe with her and us, just learning the perspective of what we have to share, not only as a healthcare, but also as a company. So, docs, tell them a little about yourself, tell them what you learned, and then, then I'll come back in a couple minutes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shannon Bundy, and yes, we have been here all week with this very passionate man, learning so much. Like he said, it's kind of been overdrive, but we've been training this entire week so that we can be prepared to open our office Monday in Louisville, Colorado. And being here this week really reminded me I have been in practice before with other patients, and we have had the opportunity to raise 5 crazy children. And because of that, I've been able to bond and have many mothers as patients. And I know for a fact that many of them have been on thyroid medications and are still on those medications, like we talked about today with the levothyroxine and Synthroid. And even though they're still suffering, when they were retested, they were told that their thyroid problem was fixed, even though they were miserable. And I knew they weren't fixed, and I knew they would suffer the negative side effects of those medications, but I did not have the Wellness Way approach or knowledge to help them. And I'm so glad that I've chosen to join the Wellness Way team and to think differently, to start helping my patients think differently. And we're just really looking forward to serving the northern Denver area.
Well, I just wanted to quickly clarify, I am not a doctor. Some of this is well over my head, but I am so grateful to be here. Information overload is a great way to describe my feelings this week. But having been here all week, the overload was just a small portion of what we got to experience here with the Wellness Way. I'm very grateful to end this week on a different perspective, because that's what I'm leaving with, is a very different perspective. Like many men, I never went to the doctor unless I was like dying. Just in general, that was my kind of go-to, like, nah, my body will deal with it.
Even though his wife is a chiropractor. Okay.
So it was always a struggle for me, but it was just a very enlightening week to learn about how our bodies are in fact designed and created to heal itself. We just need to find out what's causing, whether the different stressors that our bodies are suffering from, to help us overcome whether the sicknesses or the ailments that are causing it. And it was just great to come in here and to begin working with a company that I can get behind and that I can support, and that is able to teach these lessons in a way that even I can understand. So I'm really excited to be able to join forces to spread this message that will change the way you think, change the way that your family thinks, and hopefully change the way that our nation and the world thinks when it comes to healthcare. So thank you so much, docs. Everyone at the Wellness Way for working with us this week and putting up with me.
Well, so everybody, do me a favor, just welcome Dr. Shannon and Zach into the Wellness Way team that way. So they've been great. I haven't done this to them all week, but I have to end since they're going to a week. They're leaving here. What time you fly out today? 11. So I have to ask. I was hoping that Dr. Shannon's husband's name was Al, because one of my favorite shows of all time is actually Married with Children. And I didn't say anything all week. I held my tongue all week, but I just had to say it because, man, Al Bundy was just one of the greatest heroes to me when I was young. So thank you, guys. So you're going to have a seat. We'll be with you in just a couple minutes. So, yes. All right. So now, on that point, here's what happens. We have an intern, a very special intern. She's actually done a lot of stuff with Wellness Way since she was young as a student that way. I'm gonna have her come up here. Miss Dr. Jen, she graduates here in October, come up here. I just want to share, she started actually, was a big influence of why we actually have a club down at our school that I graduate from, about what we're doing that way. So she started following us around about 2 years ago when she heard about us while as a student. So now she's interning with us, and she's going to be practicing in a certain area. I'm gonna let her share it with you that way. So she's here interning directly for 4 months here in the Green Bay office before she heads out to practice. So this is Dr. Jen.
All right, I'm Dr. Jen. Like he said, I graduate in October, which is very exciting here. I'm originally from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, so not too far from Green Bay. I've been involved with the Wellness Way for about 2 years now, started getting the student program up in the word of the Wellness Way out to students because, again, you don't learn this in school. You learn nothing like this. You just learn to adjust, and that's basically all you learn. You don't actually learn what the cause of the problem is. So for instance, for me, you could have adjusted me forever and ever, but my symptoms wouldn't have gotten better. So I'm really excited for the future here. I am going to be opening up a clinic in Woodbury, Minnesota. So it's a suburb right east of St. Paul. So that's very exciting. I'm just excited to work with all these docs and excited that I've had 2 years already under my belt and now 4 more months of training directly under Dr. Patrick, Dr. Greg, Dr. Mitch, and Dr. Jason. So I'm very excited for the future.
Awesome. And she's all nervous. Look at she's shaking. So.
I am shaking.
Yes, awesome. Thanks, Dr. Jen. So one thing that I'd like to share with all these great docs and future docs that are out there is because here's what happens. This is the Wellness Way approach, which, for example, is a lot of people always try to ask me to define the Wellness Way, okay? And it's quite simple. It's a very different perspective, not on how the body works. Because when I go speak at medical schools or naturopathic schools or chiropractic schools or even colleges that way, they don't disagree with what I have to say. They disagree, for example, of how it's implemented into the world today. It's why I love being a teacher, but one thing is this, I would never just be a teacher because you have to take those principles and put them into clinical practice. It's why we have offices and continue to add more offices all over the world. It's exciting. The one thing that, people always say, Doc, what do you want to do over the next 20 years? Well, I want to continue to share information that's going to change people's lives dramatically. I want to be an influential person. I don't want to be well known. I want to be influential. I want our words to be able to say, when people say, listen, a doctor says no, you can't reverse, that autoimmune condition. I want to have enough influence that our doctors, they watch the video and say, that's not what one of the Wellness Way docs has said. So share that, because that's the key, because there's so many people are suffering. And don't think, here's what happens. This happens a lot. I had a conversation with a very nice young lady who actually has fell in love with what we're doing. And she said, I shared it with my family and they got downright mad. That's true, guys. Let me share this with you. I can honestly tell you, I think God prepared me for a lot of stuff in my life when it came to criticism, because criticism and hate come towards us every day. You think I'm joking, I'm not. Because here's what happens. When you first give a different idea from the dominant idea, it rattles people's cages. Because alone, my goodness, you'll actually have, especially women, attack you because they say, well, if you say I shouldn't do this, you're telling me I'm a bad mom. No, I'm saying you're an ignorant mom, which is different. Which, for example, is you don't know. But when you do know and reject it, now it's on you. So that's why sometimes I don't feel sorry for people that perpetually do wrong things, even knowingly better, okay? And I want people to understand, my heart, in the Wellness Way's heart, is to actually give you good information and to share it. But don't be surprised if, once again, family members, cousins, husbands, wife, reject what you have to say. And be prepared for it. I've always told my docs, prepare every day, because they're gonna come at you. It's like I said, it's like we're pushing up a boulder up a hill. But the cool thing is this, we're gonna continue to do that. So I thank you for guys always watching. I hope you grab the 2 major concepts of today that are so important to get that different perspective on thyroid, because this video alone could actually change a lot of people's lives. Thank you so much. God bless all you guys. And remember, we need to stop listening and start learning. God bless you guys. Have a beautiful day. Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream. Also, share this video with a friend. Once again, thank you for watching.